The following program is not intended for all audiences. Content may contain strong language and descriptions of a violent and graphic nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Nightmare Closet presents.
All right, my name is William Mitchem, and if you don't know by now, this is Paranormal Me. This is the first episode of Paranormal Me. I thought we'd start off with some good old Ouija board stories. We had a story sent in from Laura. This happened to her and some of her friends when she was around 14 years old.
Years ago, 3 of my teenage friends and I were sitting around being silly, asking the Ouija board questions. We had a candle votive on the table burning, and we were just asking silly questions, and all of a sudden we heard a loud boom. It sounded like somebody had shot through a window, and it was the votive that had just exploded. So when we told our mom about it, she come home and she said, "You're never playing with the Ouija board ever again." So we burned it in the burn barrel the next day. But it wasn't until years later that she had told us that someone in that apartment had died before we'd moved in. But she didn't want to tell us at the time because she didn't want us to be scared while we were living there. But there was a lot of things that happened in that apartment, including the TV and washing machine turning on at night by itself. It was kind of a scary place to live.
After talking to Laura after she sent in her story, I'd like to note that this was 1983, so the electronics turning on by themselves weren't like the ones that do it today, if you know what I mean. I have a lot of my own Ouija board stories. Some of them can really make your hair stand up. I'll share some of mine later. I'll share one that my aunt told me years ago when she played with the Ouija board with some of her friends. She said they would gather around with the candle lights and all the stuff you do sometimes to try to make it spooky. And she didn't believe in the Ouija board and everything, but one of her friends had one. So they decided to do it, and they was asking the teenage girl questions, who am I going to marry? What am I going to be when I grow up? Those kind of questions. And the board started to answer, and it told her that she was going to marry a guy named Mike, and she didn't know a Mike at all, she said at that time. And she asked if she was going to have children, and it said she was going to have 2. The names were going to be Nicholas and Daniel. Again, that was far from her mind. She was just a young girl. They asked how each one of them would die. Well, it said that she would be killed in a car wreck and her head would be decapitated. Well, that was enough to scare her, and she never played with one again. Years later, she ended up meeting a guy and getting married, not even thinking about it until way, way later. The guy's name was Mike. They had kids. They named them Nicholas and Daniel. Now, let's hope that was just some subconscious coincidence because my aunt's still alive. Let's just hope. Let's move on to the next Ouija board story. This is a story sent in by one of my friends. This is Scoob's story.
Okay, the story I'm about to tell isn't one I like talking about a whole lot, but here it goes. I was fresh out of high school. My first job out of high school was at a radio station, and I had a adjusted income apartment up above the local CFS building. And I had a couple of roommates with me at the time, named Travis and Janet. And I was recently dating a girl that I had, and we hadn't been going out very long. We were all hanging out at my apartment. She was there, Travis and Janet, and my girlfriend's cousin. We all had a Ouija board up there that I had recently borrowed from a friend of mine, and I didn't know a whole lot about him, and maybe I should have, considering what happened later. As most people do whenever they have one of these things, they kind of play around with it a little bit, and we would randomly get 2 different distinct spirits on there. The first one was a rather friendly spirit. He liked to joke around with us quite a bit. Seems really helpful, really nice. He said his name was Quentin Douglas, but he always went by the moniker of QD. Really helpful. He was cool. The other one, however, wasn't. A very dark entity. He went by the name Amin, which he spelled A-M-I-N, or A-M-O-N. He was a very intimidating presence. He would always signify himself by an infinity symbol that he would move with the plane shed across the board whenever he would come. And it would stay moving in that figure 8 pattern until he would begin to speak. He would say what he needed to say, and then it would go back to the infinity symbol. It was strange whenever he would speak, because everybody in the room would have like telltale signs. My sister, whenever she was around, she would sneeze. I stand corrected. Janet's eyes would water, or she'd get nosebleed. My fingertips would go numb. It was strange, because it only happened whenever we were speaking to this one spirit. The night everything went to hell in a handbasket was 2 nights before Halloween. We had got everybody together for a party. We were going to go hang out. My parents were gone for the weekend, so we were all going to house sit. And I'm thinking, oh, great, me and my girlfriend spent time together, hell yeah. Well, we'd been playing around on the board earlier that night, and some strange things had happened. Travis would never really join us in using the board. He thought it was silly. This particular night, I don't know, he just kind of had a bit of an attitude, and he was challenging the spirit. He was saying it was all bullshit. He started calling it a pussy, saying, do something, pussy, I bet you won't. I bet you won't. You can't do shit. And then he went in and laid down in the room that him and Janet slept in and closed the door. Whenever he did, things took a very dark and ominous turn. And this is where it gets rough. Because whenever he went into the room, boy, this is difficult. He kept saying, he's mine. He's mine. I own him. And I was like, who? Yeah, him. I own him. And we tried to force it to get off the board, you always say you got to make him go to goodbye, otherwise bad things happen. Well, we were so weirded out and intimidated, scared by this point, that we just kind of took our hands off of it, put it in a box. I said, fuck this, I'm taking it back to the guy we got it from, because it was only borrowed, Whenever that happened, though, we heard him moan in the bedroom, and he got up and he walked up, and he looked like he was hungover, is the only way I can really describe this. He had a weird glazed over look in his eyes, like someone, who's been, a really strong bender, would have had, which really wouldn't surprise me, because, that's all the story. Once everybody was up and collected, we got in my car, we went to a little local haunted house type thing, and it was fun. He seemed okay around this time. We got in my car, and from there we were going to drive to my parents' house, which is about maybe 12, 15 miles away. We got about 5 miles into the drive, and my car started overheating, and Travis was doing some weird shit in the back seat. He was kind of laughing at first, and it was a really weird laugh. I know you guys probably think I'm full of shit, but bear with me. Then the car really started overheating, and I had to pull over to check it. Somehow my radiator had sprung a leak, so we had to put water in the radiator, and well, needless to say, this trip took a lot longer than we expected, because we filled up about 3 or 4 jugs, water, never we had to stop. But first time we stopped was really strange. He stopped laughing, and he kept saying, man, he's talking to me. I can hear him talking to me. It's in my head. I can hear him. you know? And we was like, what the hell are you talking about? And then it was strange because he was looking down. All of a sudden, he looked straight up at me because I was looking right at him through the rearview mirror. And he says, "You're all going to die tonight." A weird look in his eyes. And now I'm getting scared. Okay. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you, dude? Well, we got the car started and managed to get to my parents' house. We had to stop 3 or 4 times, and each time he was acting weirder and weirder. Well, we got to the house, and we got him in there. He was sitting down. He was rocking back and forth. And I looked up and said, "Dude, what the fuck's wrong? What can we do to help you here, you know?" And he looked at me and said, "Ask QD." It was strange because he was never really around whenever we used the board. He knew very, very little about it. But, you know, stranger things have happened, I guess. So we kind of all looked at each other and we're like, we really want to get this thing back out again? Okay, you know, whatever. So we got the board out, you know, and, you know, we finally managed to contact, you know, the presence that identified himself as QD, and we said, what can we do to help him? You know, is he okay? And QD said, "No, danger." Okay, what can we do to help him, you know? And it said, "Burn. Close the channel. Burn." And they're like, "Burn the board?" "Yes. Close the channel. Burn." Okay. So we took this thing down to the bottom. I mean, my parents lived out in the country. We walked down to the bottom of the hill to a little trash barrel we had down there. Put the board in there. I took some newspaper, lit some newspaper, you know, on fire. Stuck it up under. We had this thing box and all in there. Stuck the newspaper underneath the box and lit it. And the whole board, I mean, like a very, very short amount of time, it just went up like it had been doused in gasoline. We put no accelerant on this, okay? Just newspaper underneath. I'm sitting here and I'm watching this flame come up, and it was strange because, here's where you're going to think I'm nuts. It was blue. The flame was blue, like a natural gas fire. 30 seconds after we did this, we heard Travis scream in the house. He runs downstairs with a look of total panic and fear in his face, grabs a stick and starts poking at it. I looked at him and I'm like, "Dude, are you okay?" He says, "I don't know." I sat there and I watched it for a while until it seemed like the flame was dying down. We went back in the house. He managed to go to sleep. Travis curled up with him. Me and my girlfriend Britta slept it all that night. Me and her and her cousin, we all just kind of sat there looking at each other. The next morning, I went down the bottom of the hill and just to make sure it all burned. And you know what? It didn't. That little perfect quarter-sized hole still remained around the know. Still plain as day. I never forgot that. That's probably one of the creepiest experiences of my life. And I know you probably think I'm nuts, huh? Wouldn't blame you if you did.
I know Ouija boards are tempting. They're just a tool, like anything else. They're not a toy. Although you may seem tempted, if you don't know what you're doing, sometimes it's better to leave things alone. There you have it, folks. What do you think about those stories? You can let me know by contacting me on Facebook at the Paranormal Meet Group page or my page, William Mitchem Jr. You can contact the website, williammitchemjr.com. You can email me at thenightmarecloset@yahoo.com. If you have any stories you'd like to share, same way, contact me there. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll try to get more out on a regular basis, but this was the first one. I hope you like it. I'm William Mitchem. This was Paranormal Me.
Ha ha ha!